Throughout his life, Vladimir Lenin suffered many assassination attempts. He would become one of the most influential and prominent politicians of the 20th century, and he would change Russia hugely. He would change it to become a one-party socialist state, which was governed by the Communist Party. His actions would lead to civil war and contribute to it, and he would, during the February Revolution, oust the Tsar and the royal family. They would overthrow the new regime of the Bolsheviks during the October Revolution. Lenin was a key political figure, and he is seen as a divisive figure and a controversial one, but he would be shot by a Ukrainian Jewish woman who would, at the age of 28, go to her own execution for attempting to kill Lenin. Fanny Kaplan was almost blind when she tried to kill Lenin, but she would experience a brutal execution herself. But in some regards her actions were slightly successful, as for the rest of his life Lenin would suffer from Kaplan's actions that day, and it's possible that these injuries eventually led to his death. Join us today as we look at the execution of the woman who shot Vladimir Lenin, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Fanny Kaplan was born as Fine Heimova Roydblatt on the 10th of February 1890, and not much is known about her childhood and her early life. She was born into a Jewish family and was raised by her father, who worked as a teacher. She also had a large family with 7 brothers and sisters, and they called her Dora. She was educated at home, but then she would leave to go and work as a milliner in Odessa. But at some point Fanny Kaplan became politically active and motivated, and it's likely her early exposure to work led her down this path. She would join the socialist revolutionaries, but then when she was just 16, she was arrested in Kiev. Political dissent in the area at times was very dangerous, and there had been a terrorist bomb plot inside of the city. Kaplan was captured following a bomb that she made with her partner exploding accidentally, and she was then accused of plotting to carry out the assassination, and because of this was sentenced to life imprisonment in a hard labour prison camp, and she was transferred to Siberia, which was one of the toughest places to be held due to the weather conditions. Fanny Kaplan, though, lost her sight, and she would become partially blind, but this would come back in some regards later on. On the 3rd of March 1917, she was released from the labour camp after the February Revolution, which would greatly affect the imperial government and the monarchy. But Fanny Kaplan at the time was in her 20s, and she was greatly affected by her imprisonment, and because of her treatment she would for the rest of her life suffer from migraines, headaches, and times in her life where she would go blind temporarily. She was not a well woman, but she was incredibly devoted to politics, but in 1917 she would lose faith and belief with Vladimir Lenin and his politics. At the time there was conflict between her party, the Socialist Revolutionaries, and the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks had a lot of support across Russia, but they would not win a majority in the November 1917 elections, and because of this the Social Revolutionary member was later elected the president in the January after the elections. The Bolsheviks would order the Constituent Assembly to be shut down. Then the Bolsheviks would sweep to ban other political parties, and they banned their rivals. The Socialist Revolutionaries also suffered, and this was what Fanny Kaplan supported, and the Bolsheviks would turn on their allies, who they had been coalition partners with for a while. With this, Fanny Kaplan then began to consider the best way that she could deal with Lenin, and she began to plot and plan assassination attempts. She regarded Lenin, who was a man who was a traitor to the revolution, and she wanted to make him pay. On the 30th of August 1918, Vladimir Lenin would go to the Hammer and Sickle, which was a weapons factory located in the south of Moscow. Fanny Kaplan had heard about his appearance, and she would then go to the factory to see Lenin amongst the crowds, but she was there with sinister intentions. She placed herself near to the exit of the building that Lenin was in, and after visiting the factory and praising the workers, he then left the building, and along with a few guards, walked towards the car that would take him away. Whilst Lenin approached the car, Fanny Kaplan shouted out to him, screaming his name, and Lenin turned round to see who was shouting him, and as he turned towards her, she shot 3 bullets at Lenin from a Browning pistol. One of the bullets passed through Lenin's coat, missing him, but the other 2 Kaplan fired hit Lenin. One was a very serious wound that went through his neck and punctured part of his left lung, with the bullet stopping and coming to a rest near to his right collarbone. The other bullet was struck in his left shoulder. Following firing at him, Kaplan tried to leave the scene, as Lenin was taken away and escorted to his living quarters at the Kremlin. But he believed that this was part of a larger coup, and because of this he suspected anyone who came in to treat him. He really needed hospital assistance, and to be in hospital to have the bullets removed in a sterile and clean environment. But he would refuse this because of further fears of assassination. Doctors came to his rooms, but could not remove the bullets safely, and because of this, Lenin then had to deal with the bullets inside of him for the rest of his life. He would survive initially the assassination attempt, but many historians have claimed that in the end Fanny Kaplan was successful in her attempt to kill Lenin. This is because later in his life, his health would never recover, and it's believed that the effects of the shooting may have led to the strokes, which left him in a sorry state when he was later incapacitated. Eventually these strokes would kill Lenin, and if the bullets from Kaplan's revolver did cause these, there is a belief that she was successful in her quest to assassinate the leader of the Soviet Union. But back at the factory, there were different stories regarding Fanny Kaplan's capture. One stated that following firing the 3 shots, a woman who looked suspicious was detained, but another account states that the witnesses in the crowd identified her and that it was children's testimony who turned her over. She was then brought to a prison for her interrogations. It's possible she believed that whatever fate came her way could be nothing compared to the years she spent inside of the hard labour camp in Siberia. During her interrogation, it's believed that she was tortured, and she would state in her confession that, "My name is Fanny Kaplan. Today I shot Lenin. I did it on my own. I will not say from whom I obtained my revolver. I will give no details. I had resolved to kill Lenin long ago. I consider him a traitor to the revolution. I was exiled to Akatui for participating in an assassination attempt against a Tsarist official in Kiev. I spent 11 years at hard labour. After the revolution, I was freed. I favour the Constituent Assembly and am still for it." But the authorities wanted her to hand over people who she worked with, and they were convinced that she could not have worked on her own, trying to kill Lenin, but Kaplan would give over no information at all. Eventually, a military commander would protect himself and would turn state's evidence against her. He would claim that Fanny Kaplan was a member of the Socialist Revolutionaries, that this was a plot conspired by them to kill Lenin. He would also say that Kaplan was said to have been the best person to carry out the attack, as she would attract the least suspicion in the crowd. Some historians have claimed, though, that she could not have carried out the attack herself, as she was nearly blind, and she would have needed someone else to help. No witnesses would claim that they saw her shoot the gun, as they would not see the deadly shots. What is also interesting too is the fact that the bullets which were embedded inside Lenin were removed after his death, and these were allegedly different to the ones fired by Fanny Kaplan's weapon. But because she was frustrating and would not give over information, she was seen as a lost cause, and the Soviets then ordered her execution. It's possible that her antics and history had gone against her too. But her execution would be swift. In Alexandra Gardens, Fanny Kaplan was led out from her prison cell, and there was a commander of the Kremlin and former Baltic sailor, P.D. Markov, and a group of Latvian Bolsheviks. These were her execution squad. On the 3rd of September 1918, she walked towards the executioners, who then quickly shot her in the back of the head. But what happened next was barbaric. Her remains were then collected and were thrown into a barrel, which was then burned and set on fire. Yakov Sverdlov was the man who gave the order to do this, and he was also the man who would order the execution of the Russian royal family and the last Tsar. Fanny Kaplan's body and remains were reduced to nothing, but some rumours did emerge around Soviet society that she had been spared, and that she had been sent back to the Siberian labour camp, but this is not what happened. At the age of just 28, Fanny Kaplan was executed inside of a garden or a park by Lenin's Bolshevik execution squads. She had a tough life which was dominated by politics, but she was imprisoned in a horrific labour camp that led to her being beaten to the point where she experienced blindness. Still today, historians debate her role in the assassination attempt on Lenin's life, and some doubt that she was the real executioner, and she could not really have shot straight into the leader of the Soviet Union because of her eyesight. But Lenin would survive the attack. However, his health would not be the same following Kaplan's attempt on his life, and he would suffer from poor health until the day he died, and it has been alleged that he would be killed in part by the complications from the bullets left inside his body. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.